Hello, and welcome to Covert Castaway. I'm Holly.
Je suis Stéphane.
Join us as we share what we learn and how we're making the transition to liveaboard cruising. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about whether it's a good idea to have a house, keep a house, or kind of not have any strings and, not have any ties to any kind of a home base, if you will. We get some of those questions like that. So excited to talk about that today. The other thing we want to mention real quick before we dive into the topic is that we are going to be announcing our new boat here in just a couple days. Now, if you listen to this later, that will be September of 2022 is what we're talking about. But we're excited about that, so stay tuned and check out our YouTube page and subscribe. It'd be great if you could also see some of the pictures and the videos we're doing as well. So you ready to dive into this topic, Stefan?
Yeah, and just obviously it's what we're talking about is it's a personal decision. Everybody has to come up to their own conclusion. What we're doing today or trying to do today is to share our own experience. It's kind of interesting because we started with some thoughts or reasoning, then we evolve into another one, and in the end, we're liking the decision we made, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
So there was an evolution, and we thought it would be interesting for us to share our own experience, and maybe somebody might take away something from it.
And just to start, the dream is you're gonna sell all your things, and you're gonna sell your house, and you're gonna quit your job, and you're gonna sail off into the sunset, no strings attached. And that's the general idea, right? That's kind of the thought that goes through everybody's mind.
That's the brochure.
Yeah. Or on a bad day at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily kind of unfold that way as you're making these decisions, though. So it's an interesting process.
Yeah. And obviously, all this is going to depend of many different personal reasons and also personal budget, and you might have to sell your house to buy a boat. And we're definitely not saying to postpone your sailing, cruising dreams. We're just, again, sharing our own experience. And
so what were our options? Do you want to go through those?
Yeah, and before, the reason to maybe consider those different scenarios is just in case things don't work out. And I know when we go through this dream and this lifestyle change, or at least personally, like I'm kind of more that way. I'm focusing on the positive outcomes and not so much looking on the what could go wrong. But I would say
that's why we make a good team.
Yeah, we balance each other. And but there are, I would say in the last couple of years we've been cruising, and you meet people and everybody has a story, and that's
all different stories and flavors for sure. Yeah.
But things could change for many possible reasons. It could be money, it could be relationships. When you're on a boat 24/7, the liveaboard lifestyle was maybe a dream, and reality sinks in.
And we've heard these stories. We're not trying to freak anybody out, but these are things that happen. So
yeah. It could be like a family event. And, of course, COVID was very unusual,
global
but
pandemic,
this happened, and so it's just things to be aware of. And so, in the possible scenarios, it might be if you already have a house and if you have the means to buy a boat, or maybe you're deciding to keep the house, that means a smaller boat, and you make this trade-off. Maybe the first couple of years, you're going to say, okay, let's keep the house. Let's see in 2 years, let's reassess. And maybe if you're figured out, maybe like us, maybe you want to buy a different boat. Maybe you're loving the liveaboard lifestyle. So then at that point, you're maybe we sell the house and maybe we buy a different boat. And so maybe to give yourself 2 years of trial and errors and reassess might be an option. Another one is kind of downsize. You're moving onto a boat and you're going to downsize. So maybe you have the house and the thinking is, well, let's keep the house and let's rent it. But another thinking is like, well, let's sell the house. Let's find a small place. Let's find a little apartment somewhere.
So sell the house and rent an apartment like we did, you mean? Or you mean sell the house and get a smaller place?
Yeah, no, sell the house, get some money out of the house,
Yeah.
buy a smaller place that you can come to and use it for rental purposes and stuff like this. And so those are possible scenarios. So anyway, we'll talk about what we went through, and then we'll see.
Yeah. So what happened to us is we started out and we were like, okay, we're gonna sell everything and we're gonna get on the boat. And you were like way more excited about that. I was freaking out a little bit, not because I'm afraid of not having a home, but because I was afraid something would go wrong and, wanted to be able to have a safety net to come back to. What I mean is, my mom's getting older and I was concerned for her health and what if I needed to be there. My daughter's getting older, like what if she gets married? Those were the kinds of things that initially were holding me back. Even not just selling the house we were in, but also just not having another house. And we're in a situation where we were buying the boat in addition to like making the decision about the house. So that's a factor too.
Yeah. At the same time, so there was a little bit the side of living the dream. I know you also liked to not have a mortgage, to not have like kind of deal with with monthly payments and stuff like this. So that was kind of the attractive side.
Yeah, I mean that's all part of like simplifying your life, right? Like you live this complicated, conventional life, and you own a home, and you pay taxes, and you have insurance, and you have attorneys, and you have accountants, and all these things. And it's sort of like you kind of just want to, cut the strings a little bit and not have all these things to worry about. So that was what was appealing for me.
Yeah, another thing that was, well, I think that was appealing to both of us was, okay, we're living here, we love where we used to live, and it was great when we had kids, when we had jobs, but we were thinking, well, where would we come back? Would that make sense to come back in the same town, same area? And we were like, no.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I'd forgotten about that. At one point we were like, yeah, this is a great place to raise a family, but is this a great place to be if you're in kind of this next phase of life, with or without the boat? That was sort of, it made us question, like, would we live here, if we hadn't been living here? Mm-hmm. So even to downsize and just move from one side of town to another in a smaller place, like we kind of had this whole discussion about like, well, what if we get on the boat and we, sail around and find all these places and decide maybe on or off the boat, we want to live somewhere else.
Yeah, that was definitely one thing that was attractive to me. It's let's go discover the world. I always considered myself a citizen of the world. That's what pushed me to leave France at 25. I didn't want to kind of live and work where I was born. That was not boundaries that I want to set for myself. So it was like, well, let's get a boat. Let's travel around the world. Let's discover countries, and maybe let's buy a shack somewhere where we're happy to live. And so let's use that opportunity to travel to figure out.
And then figure that out later. Yeah.
And so those were some of the arguments that got us to lean into cut all the ties, move as full-time, live abroad. And then what you were talking about was like, I think, I don't know how far after, but when it started, but you were like, yeah, maybe I want to rethink this.
Yeah. What happened was, and I've always been kind of a real estate junkie. I'm always looking at Zillow and looking at houses. And I mean, it's just always been interesting.
And I hate that.
And I know. But it's always been interesting to me. I don't know if anybody else can relate, but, just kind of, I don't know, curious and also fantasizing, or just kind of looking at, wow, this is crazy, these prices for these homes in these areas. And I don't just mean in the US, I mean like anywhere around the world. So I've always been interested in real estate. And So then what happened is I started reading some articles about rental properties. And I was like, well, maybe that could kind of be a nice little middle ground, where you have something, but it's, it's not sitting empty when you're gone. And so, I was looking at long-term rentals. I was looking at short-term rentals and reading a lot of books about rental income and, having that kind of income stream in general seemed like it might be a good idea too, especially, I think at that point we hadn't fully thought through like how we were going to, continue to make money, on the boat either. So that was sort of in the back of my head is maybe that's also a revenue stream.
Yeah. And the other thing that was ironic in the thinking of, there were different arguments to pick a location where we ended up buying something else smaller. But the argument about the parents aging, it's kind of ironic because your mom and her husband ended up moving across country.
Yeah, I was going to share that a little bit later as a plot twist. But yeah, so when we ended up, buying a home, that's sort of, we bought it to stay in the area so we could be close to family, and then they ended up moving. But anyway, so when we were looking at the real estate situation and looking for a rental property, I was sort of all over the map. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, Miami, and oh, maybe it's sinking, for climate change. It's like, oh, how about, tax-friendly states or, all these things. And then suddenly it dawned on me that Tahoe was right in the backyard of San Francisco, which is where my mom and my sister and, my kids and everybody is, and our friends and stuff. So it's, far enough away, and we like the mountains, that would be a good idea. But like, what did you think when I brought up Tahoe initially?
Well, the thinking, like for Tahoe, for me, was like winter skiing. And so it was not a destination, I don't know, for whatever reason, as like a place to live year round if you ended up living there. It was really more like a ski resort, and totally discovered that its summer is even better.
Yeah. So what's weird is, I got this thought bubble in my head, and I'm like, oh, Tahoe. And I looked at some properties that were on Zillow that were available, and we wanted something small-ish, not too big, and we wanted the opportunity to potentially do it as a vacation rental. Definitely long-term rentals are an option and are very flexible in the area. But in Tahoe in particular, and I think this might be true in other kind of vacation areas, is the VHR permits. They're limited. So I wanted to be sure we could get a rental permit for a vacation rental. And so I got a realtor and kind of picked some properties, and I found this property, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Not only for a rental, but I could actually picture us living here. So I drove back because I came up over the weekend by myself. So when I drove back and I was like, oh, we're going to do this. Like, what did you think about that?
Well, my head was in a different place, and you see pictures, but you're trying to visualize, and so I was not at the same stage you were at, obviously, because you had been looking at stuff, and then you came to physically look at houses. So I was a little bit further back, so I had to catch up, and then we ended up making a trip together. And so to kind of bring me along where you were. And
And my logic was, okay, let's just take the worst case scenario. We're out sailing. The boat sinks, God forbid, we have a place to come back to, or the world, goes to hell in a handbasket, and we can't, or our health, like something happens to us. And we can no longer sail, like maybe we can come back and do that. So that was sort of one way I rationalized it. Second way I rationalized it was kind of, as you mentioned, my mom was getting older, and if I had to come back for some reason, I could, care for her. And it just gave me a little safety net, I think mentally is what it made me feel like.
Yeah. And then even though the rental income was part of the conversation, it's kind of funny because once we moved into the house and we started to fall in love with our new home. And
especially because of COVID, like we spent more time here than we originally planned.
yeah,
right.
And then it was like, wow, we don't want anybody else to come into our home.
I know. And then we're having like mixed emotions.
So
about it.
then definitely the first season we were not ready to rent, and it was kind of a possibility, thinking about looking for a property, but it was also not like a solid thing. And so it's more came in the second season. We were thinking, okay, that season is not super long, but if we ended up crossing the Atlantic and so forth,
it'd be empty a long time.
Yeah, and then let's test this rental option and let's see what we learn. If renters destroy the house, then we'll stop there. Or if we're happy, then we'll keep on going. And so I know a lot of people have bad experiences. So far, so good.
Yeah, so far. And I want to talk about that more. I want to just add as well that another thing I was thinking about is, the kids. Like maybe the kids would want to come up and visit us, and we would want to hang out in Tahoe and have a little vacation time with our kids when we came back from the boat, because really none of them are interested in sailing except your daughter, who, will probably join us on the boat. So I kept thinking like proximity to kids, proximity to family, proximity to where, our roots were. And, as we were kind of thinking about the rental property and trying it out, that was also in the back of my head is, that it would be sort of a family place to have. Because I was the one, too, that was hosting all of the holidays and everything in our family. And so I felt like I needed a place that, like, that could still happen, Mm-hmm. So the first...
Which is just a side note, which is kind of funny also because... when we bought the boat, we were thinking, oh, the kids will come and friends and family. Granted, you're in the Med, it's far away from the west coast of the US,
too,
and COVID happened. Yeah. But even though, I think you also realize the logistics is complicated, and then to make plans kind of from long distance.
And kids that age have their own lives.
Exactly.
They're doing their own thing. And that's something we learned, too, I think, in great detail. So... just going back, so the first season, we spent more time in the house than we originally had planned because of COVID. You had to fly back, and we weren't really working on the boat. So we sort of set up the situation where I was doing the rentals myself. Like I set up a little web page. I, set up a way to manage it and sort of opened it up to just people that we knew or friends of friends who could sort of rent it just to test it out. And get comfortable with that. And then to your point, in the second season, we spent a lot more time away. And then I realized I was completely overwhelmed and couldn't manage the property that way, couldn't manage the any of the, logistics, and with the time difference, it was kind of a mess. So we got a rental property company, and that took some time to work through and kind of get things right. So it went from kind of testing the waters to actually a lot of people wanted to rent it. And when we came back, at both times, what I was happy about, is nothing major got broken. There weren't like holes in the walls, and were you surprised by the condition of the house when we got back?
No, I mean, on one way, I think there are a couple things. First, you're like, okay, what are they going to steal and break? Like, okay, a TV.
Yeah, what's the worst that can happen?
Fridge.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay.
Because all of our other stuff is put away.
And when you rent, you have like an insurance. So you're like, well, okay, we'll get a new fridge or we'll get a new TV. And so one side is like, okay, and we don't have any, it's our stuff, but we don't have like personal stuff. We put it away. So that was that. The house, and you're thinking, well, we purposely also limited it to the number of people so we don't get like
we put a lot of
parties
limitations. Yeah.
to try to increase the chances that we have good renters. And
Yeah, because we like our neighbors, and
That
we want
too.
them to like us. So
yeah. So then you're like, well, we love our home, and I think when people come, and I think that's important if you have a rental, is to make it feel like a home, that you're somebody's place. And in general, people want to take care of stuff.
they want to feel like they're a welcome guest, And so what we did is little touches around the house that we would enjoy because we've been spending a lot of time in Airbnbs and we know what we like, and certain things just kind of leave an impression on you. And so I think we made it nice where people would kind of like it here and enjoy it, not just some like volume rental place, where 12 people at once kind of all crash, which there's some of that in Tahoe too, which isn't great for neighbors.
Yeah, so I think all these little things help. If you can also, the house, everything is functional. And I think to make sure to also do like preventive maintenance, kind of a little bit like on a boat. So if they see everything working, everything feels like a home, I was like, well, what's going to happen if there is a hole in the wall? We can patch it up. And so I was...
But you never know. Like all these things go through your head.
Yeah,
right?
It definitely does. And I didn't know, but at the same time, when I was thinking deeper about it, I was like, well... how bad can it be? Of course, they could burn the house.
I guess. Well, let's talk about fire in a minute because I want to talk about some worries. So, first of all, we were worried about damage to the house. We weren't sure if we could actually, the goal wasn't to make money on the house. The goal was to have the rental income offset the cost of having the house. So we just kind of wanted to break even. We weren't thinking, it'll be a ton of income. We knew it would be some, but we had pretty low expectations. But then, so you're away on the boat, and I finally kind of handed everything over to the rental property company, which took time. And by the way, like they take 25%. It's not like some cheap thing. Like
no,
it's
that's
expensive.
why the initial thought was like, well, let's do it ourselves.
I'll manage it myself. Yeah, but that's not happening.
And then you're like, oh, okay, 25% is decent.
The time zones were a real problem. But, then there were worries like, what if something, happens? So something did happen. Last year, while we were away, there was a wildfire, and we live in the mountains. And the fire ended up traveling over the Sierras, which nobody thought was going to happen. They evacuated all of the South Lake Tahoe area and where we live, our neighborhood, our neighborhoods all around. Everybody left. They canceled all the vacation rentals. And we were
just the smoke was like,
oh yeah, the
level.
smoke was awful. Right. And then, but we were like glued to our Google Maps and the fire tracker or whatever, because nobody thought it was going to crawl over the Sierras. And it did 12 miles, I think, in one 24-hour period. And, where it got to on that day, I'll never forget. I looked at him like, it is 8 miles from our house. And so, we kind of at that point had resolved to like losing the house. Like at least I did. I kind of wrapped my head around that. I called my insurance company and I was like, what's going to happen? And this and that. That thankfully didn't happen. But yeah, that was a worry. And so then the other thing is we came back and we have the bills on auto pay, and except one, which is the water bill. Which I get statements for, and they go to my sister's house. And we came back, and I'm opening up my mail. And
well, it's on auto pay. It's just like
it's on auto pay, but the bills themselves show up in paper statements. Yeah, exactly. So,
that's why she doesn't
open them because she's like, oh, you pay the bill. Well, we had a water leak that was, it was bad.
Well, it started in August. So we were in Greece.
We were in Greece in August. We didn't get back to the U.S. until December.
Past mid-December, like right before Christmas. So that's when we found out. And we're in San Francisco when we found out.
Yeah.
So we don't know like what
is happening.
Yeah, luckily, what the leak started in August, but gradually.
But let's talk about
increased.
how big of a leak it was.
Yeah, I kind of forget now.
No, it's 25 gallons an hour.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a lot of water. And so we're looking. So we get to the house and we're looking all around. Stefan's down in the basement.
Well, we first look in the house.
Oh, sure, the toilets, and is there
we
something
see nothing,
broken?
so we're like, okay, no damages.
No
there
damage.
We go. I go under the basement,
and I'm expecting like a pool of water, right, underneath there, and
no
you're
water.
like, "There's nothing, Holly," and we're like, "It's this mystery phantom water. Like, what's happening?"
Maybe there's no leak, and there.
And by the way, there were like 6 feet of snow.
Yeah,
and so there was nothing visible that we could see anywhere, and we live on this little. Is it a hill or a mountain? I don't know. We live on this huge rock. So you would think that you would see that much water, gravity would take it somewhere. You would see a pool of it somewhere. Nothing, none of that. So that was a process getting that fixed. You finally called the city. I mean, we had contractors out. We had.
Well, it took a couple months to eventually figure out where the leak was. Also because the ground is frozen.
Nobody
because of
wanted
the snow, so we have to wait until the spring. But the spring was when we're going to leave. So those are headaches that eventually, as a homeowner.
And the thing is, and we wouldn't have been able to. First of all, we wouldn't have found it had we not come back and like properly looked. So lesson learned on our part, like open everything.
So and what we did since there is this automatic water shut-off valve that we installed. So the pipe that comes into the house detects now if there would be a leak. So that would be one.
That's
one thing
to know the problem is there, right? But what I'm saying is,
to avoid damages.
Yeah. So we wouldn't have been able to do anything about it from remotely, though. Like that would have been really difficult to fix. From a boat.
Yeah, the leak ended up being outside. But at least if there was a leak in the toilet, this is a device you can install. And it measures the water going through, and then if it sees an unusual behavior, you'll get a text and something, and I can remotely turn it off. So that will be something that that now we have a peace of mind because we know what's going on. If there is something, even if we sleep somewhere else on the other side of the world, the damages will be limited. Now, if there's
fixing, it's another issue, though.
Yeah. And if the leak is outside, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So there's certain things you can do to help yourself.
Yeah, but it doesn't relieve, the worry from a fire or from a potential leak or, pipe breaks or, these things that you really kind of have to be here for. Other things is, we have to, it's harsh weather up here in the summer and in the winter. And so we have to paint the whole house. So there's just more maintenance, I guess, in this area than what we're used to.
We're picturing people are like, okay, so I'm not buying.
No, yeah. So let's get to the good part. I'm just wanted to be thorough on, what we've experienced, in terms of.
It's like a boat, it's all trade-offs. And I would say we faced the issue. We understand that there's good reason to sell everything and go because there's enough potential headaches with the boat. But so far, the little problems the property management company has dealt with them.
Yeah, they've been great. Once we got them ramped up.
Yeah, and this bigger problem it ended up working out because we were back home, and now we've installed the device to help prevent this. Nothing. Yeah, nothing is perfect, but we still in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we still like our decisions. So.
Yeah, and I think this past year, so far, we've been traveling a lot nomad style without a boat because we're between boats. So we were like professional, couch crashers or whatever they call them. We're definitely getting really good at staying at other places. I mean, I don't know how many Airbnbs and VRBOs and vacation rentals we've been on this year, but it's been a lot. And, you get to a place and you're like, that it's noisy or there's construction, or one house was like, it smelled really weird. And
yeah, I mean, the one we picked to stay for 2 months and we really kind of thought it would be like a great location and everything looked good. We talked to the property management company and we felt pretty good about it. And we say, okay, that's where we're going to be based for a couple months, for 2 months. And then, there was clearly a dog in there, and there was no AC. We knew that, but they said they would be fun, but they were not
ventilation.
Like, they're not like in the fans like you have on the ceiling, and they were just little fans that were noisy. And then the smell of the dog seems to be worse.
Really bad. The construction was the worst part, though.
The construction, is right around the corner. And so it's like, so there was the kitchen smell too.
Yeah.
And then at night you could see.
And I don't want us to sound like we're complaining, because like these are really good problems to have, like the fact that we get to travel and do all this stuff. So I don't want to say that. It's just, I guess what the point I want to make is when we came back home, we were like, oh my God, my bed, we're in our own house. I have some familiar things that I missed, whether it's books or, a dress you get to wear, or whatever it, the skin lotion I left here. It sounds really dumb, but coming back and just being able to just kind of exhale, that's what I really, really liked, especially the first season. Remember the first season we got back and we were just exhausted. Mm-hmm. And we were, it was stressful the first season. By the way, don't ever measure like how happy you are doing this live aboard thing after the first season. Like wait till the second season. It gets way better. But the first season we came back, we were just exhausted, overwhelmed. Well, maybe you weren't, I was. And we came back and it was like, wow, we could just relax. We weren't at anchor. We weren't worrying about anything. Yeah,
and that's the point, is to just, that's one thing we discovered. It's really nice to come back to something familiar where the Wi-Fi is good, because we've gone into some places.
That's
like
true.
we were in Guadeloupe. Oh, is there Wi-Fi? Yes, there is Wi-Fi.
I can do Zoom calls. No, that wasn't happening.
And so as you move from rental to rental, and that starts to get old after a while. So it's like, that's one argument of like being able to come back to a familiar place. Because if you want to be able to work on some projects, like we're doing right now, we're doing some work or like doing some projects to prep for, for the boat for the next year.
Doing some videos for our YouTube channel.
Yeah, which is a very much full-time job. But like when you're in a familiar environment, it definitely helps to organize your life, because you're going to be gone for a long period of time. So to have this time is great. And we know other people who move like this, and they tend to rent, like they move even more to stay. And maybe that's to prevent, like if you have a bad Airbnb experience or something.
Yeah, then you're leaving in a week.
Or 2 weeks, and we're thinking kind of, unless we had to move for a different reason, we're thinking, okay, can we stay in one solid place? And so...
But it's nice too to like come back, say it's 3 months a year or 2 months a year, right? What I like is, at least that's how it's been kind of for us, is I like being able to come back, you carve out a couple projects, like I'm writing a book or working on, some of these little things we wanted to get done. But there's also like housekeeping stuff, like admin stuff, paying your taxes, making sure all, the loose ends in your life are tied up. And it's kind of nice. Also, you can kind of get into a little bit more of a routine. We've been doing hikes now or walks every day, or at least trying to, mostly every day. Eating better, consistently on a boat. And when you're traveling, certainly in Airbnbs, it's a lot harder, I think, than on a boat. On a boat, you can control your environment a little bit more. But just having that time to sort of, get everything in order, that's really nice.
Yeah, and I think we've told that story before, but it's this older couple that had been cruising for decades, and that we ended up meeting at the dock, and we ended up hopping on their boat and at the dock and chit-chatting, and that story, they obviously had met many cruisers, and they were in the camp of cruising for a period of the year and go back home, and then the other cruisers were like full-time live aboard, and what they learn is the camp that breaks the cruising lifestyle is the camp that's going longer.
The cruise is longer.
Yeah, the cruise is longer versus if you're full-time live abroad. That may be
it's hard. It's hard, and I think it's good to have some downtime
to consider
for sure. So net, I think we went into the house decision like, no, we don't need a house. We're going to sell everything, and no strings attached. We're just going to release the dock lines and off we go. And they were like, wait a minute, all these reasons to stay. And then now what we've learned is there's completely different reasons that we love it. Mm-hmm. And, I think sometimes we get questions about this. And I think the best advice, at least from where we're standing and what we've been through so far, is you don't really have to make a decision right away. You can kind of, ease into it. Like if you have a house and you can keep a house, maybe you want to rent it for a while. Or, if you are committed to downsizing and you want to get an apartment, like at least you have that to come back to and you want to do that, that's fine too. Or a vacation rental. Like that was a really interesting path we went down that I never, it was never in our original financial plan. So that kind of worked out. So, it's not necessary to completely make the decisions all at once, you know?
And I think it's important for couples. It's to recognize both parties, because somebody might be more risk adverse and the other one,
like me,
and then it's a major lifestyle change to just go live on a boat, even if it's part time, and just to have that comfort of knowing, there is one place somewhere you can come back to until you adjust to this new lifestyle. And so it's important for, two people in a couple to just really be understanding of the other person, where they're at, and making some concessions. And a year, 2 years later, then you can readjust.
And it's definitely just one last thought I was having was what you focus on gets bigger, right? So like if you're thinking about all the things you're going to leave or all the stuff you have to get rid of or how long you've been in the house and how you raise the kids, and that feels really big to step away from. But when you're on a boat and you're focused on the boat and you're focused on living on the boat, that's what becomes kind of the center of your attention. Mm-hmm. And so little by little, it's sort of this process of separation from conventional life to a different life. And so that's also, I think, at least for me, that was part of the transition I was going through, is kind of that letting go piece of it. So it's not just about like logistics and, all these things we were kind of been talking about. It's emotional, right? It's an emotional change. Mm-hmm. And I think a mental transition. And I can't say I didn't go through a little bit of loss, in that. But as we got more comfortable on the boat, I was so focused on that, like that became our new home. So, and you see it on videos and stuff, people are like, the boats are home, because that's what the focus is at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But when you're making the transition, it's definitely hard.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts or advice before we wrap it up?
No, I think we've covered quite a few points, and maybe there will be a podcast that triggers a conversation between two people, and just to just have a conversation. Yeah.
And I appreciate you being so open to, the rental thing. Cause I think in the beginning you were kind of like, what are you doing?
Yeah. But in the end, this is what's interesting. I started somewhere, you kind of were mostly in the same camp, you changed, I was maybe not there, but now we're both in the same camp.
Page.
And so it all worked out.
Yeah.
But it's a process, and you might go one direction, you might not be happy with it.
And it's okay. You can change your mind. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, make sure if you have any comments or questions and you want to continue the conversation, you know where to reach us at sailingowen@gmail.com. And again, don't forget, in a few days here, 1 week, are we in the 1 week mark almost, or a little less than a week?
Yeah, less than a week.
Yeah, we get to announce our new boat. So please stay tuned for that. Fair winds for now.
Bye bye. Au revoir. Bon vent.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, like, or share with another covert castaway. Fair winds for now.